What's up, guys? So I've been trying to think of some other useful information that would help the Audi community with these A4s and doing these different builds and projects and whatnot. So I actually have converted a front-wheel drive car to a Quattro car, and I didn't take any video when I did it, and I don't currently have a front-wheel drive car that I want to switch to all-wheel drive. But I have pictures that I took of when I was doing the swap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down all the parts that you need to do the swap, and I'm going to basically talk over the pictures and explain what's going on. And hopefully this will help anybody that has a front-wheel drive car that they want to swap to a Quattro. It is very doable. The major components that you need the Quattro gas tank, because the gas tank is completely different. You need the entire rear subframe. So the axles, the differential, the subframe, the control arms, the shocks, everything. Everything for the rear end, which you can get out of a wrecked A4. And then you need the drive shaft as well. Now, the most important part of the entire Quattro swap, which was the hardest part for me to do and the hardest part for me to figure out, is there are some support brackets for the two-piece drive shaft in the center of the drive shaft. They're actually welded to the car. They are not on the front-wheel drive vehicles. I, for the life of me, do not understand why they didn't just weld the brackets onto the car so that when they were going down the assembly line, whether it was front-wheel drive or Quattro, they could just bolt it on there. But the front-wheel drive cars do not have the brackets to mount the support bearing for the two-piece drive shaft. So what I did was I drilled out some mounting brackets off of a car in the junkyard and pulled those brackets off. So I drilled the spot welds out, and I actually measured where they were on the car before I took them off. Got really good measurements from the rear of the car, from different solid mounting points, and I'll actually have to look on my car to remember where I measured from. But I took solid measurements on where the brackets belonged. Then I drilled out the spot welds and took them off of the car in the junkyard. Came home, I measured out on my car where they were going to go, ground down to bare metal, cleaned up the brackets to bare metal, welded them into the car, and held them in place with clamps and jigs so that I could make sure that everything was where it needed to be. And then after I did that, I primed everything, I put some seam sealer around the welds. Then I primed everything and painted everything. And I never had a problem out of that car. That was the blue car that was featured in one of my videos, I don't know, 2 months ago. That was my very first B6, and I absolutely love that car. Wish I still had it. But that's the car that I did the Quattro swap on, and it was not difficult. The other hard part is adding the additional fuel sending unit, which isn't really difficult, but you have to recode the instrument cluster to Quattro instead of front-wheel drive because it has two fuel sending units, and it has a crossover pump. That's why the gas tank's completely different, because it's actually a divided gas tank for the drive shaft to go through. So you absolutely have to change the gas tank. But if you get all that, the complete rear subframe, the gas tank, all the heat shielding, I actually had a car that I bought that was wrecked that I took all of it off. So I actually got lucky. I had all the heat shielding, I had the gas tank, all the evap system. I had everything that I could possibly need to do the swap, even though I didn't need that much. I wanted to have everything just to make sure that if there was any really weird, odd parts that wouldn't stand out, that I would have them if I needed them. And because I've done this before, I know a complete list of what you need to do of how to add the system. Now, the biggest issue is going to be the drive shaft length. Now, when I swapped mine to a Quattro, the wrecked car that I had was the car that I started out with was a 1.4 liter or 1.8 liter turbo with a 5-speed front wheel drive. The Quattro system that I swapped it for was a 5-speed Quattro 1.8T car. My blue one was a 2002. The other car that I swapped the Quattro from was a 2003. So almost identical. But it was a 5-speed for a 5-speed, just Quattro versus front-wheel drive. After I did the 5-speed swap to the Quattro, I decided that I wanted the 6-speed gearbox because I had eventually planned on doing the 2.7, which I wound up doing. But the 6-speed is a little bit shorter than the 5-speed. So what I wound up doing was I took the front mounting puck off of a drive shaft that I had. I had 3 different drive shafts because I was trying to find one that fit. So I went to the junkyard and I bought 3 different drive shafts out of 3 different vehicles to see which one would fit. And none of them did fit. But my 5-speed drive shaft fit with an extra puck, the front mounting puck. And I'll show you what I'm talking about when I get underneath the car showing you the system. But if you just knock that off one of your old drive shafts, or go to the junkyard and knock one off of a drive shaft and put it in there with longer Allen head bolts to hold it to the rear output shaft, I never had a problem out of it. It drove like freaking, it was completely smooth. I mean, it's not ideal. Ideally, you would want to extend the drive shaft, but I was trying to do it without having to have a custom-made drive shaft because I just didn't have the money to do it. So anyway, that's it. That's only if you're doing the 5-speed to the 6-speed Quattro swap. The drive shaft is the wrong length. Now, they do make a drive shaft that is the correct length for that swap, but they are almost impossible to find for under $1,000, and I just didn't want to spend $1,000 for the drive shaft. I'm cheap. If you guys haven't figured that out by now, then you're missing something, because I will do everything as cheap as possible, but also as reliable as possible. So, but yeah, we'll get out there and I'm going to go underneath the car and I'm going to show you exactly what has to be changed. I'm going to go through the pictures that are included in this video just to show you the differences between the different systems. And hopefully this gives you the information that you need if you're interested in doing a Quattro swap. Okay, so this is how my Audi started. It was a front-wheel drive 5-speed, never been modified. So this next picture shows just after I added the wheels, tinted the windows, didn't do a whole lot to it. But then we get into what we're actually going to do with the vehicle. So the first picture that you're going to see is just the rear brake assembly with the wheel removed, car sitting up on jack stands, just showing the difference between what's in the car now versus what's going to be next, showing the way the rear exhaust looks and everything. Now, this next picture shows there's 2 brackets that are original to the front wheel drive that need to be removed. This first one and then this second one. And then that's just showing the mounting point for it. Then you need to make note of removing all your exhaust from the car. So just remove that clamp, remove the hangers, front and rear, and then you need to make sure that you remove. When I did this, I took the ABS wheel sensors out and disconnected the parking brake cables from the rear end that was in the front wheel drive vehicle. But I later wound up using the emergency brake cable and handle and everything out of the all-wheel drive system. So you may not want to do this step. You may want to leave it attached and just remove the emergency brake handle and everything all as one unit. You may not. You may just want to switch the cables. It's entirely up to you. This next picture is trying to show what the original front-wheel drive rear subframe looks like. It's very lightweight. There's not a whole lot of structure to it. It's strong, but it's vastly smaller than what the all-wheel drive system subframe looks like. So, and then this is showing the exhaust for the all-wheel drive system. And then you do have to disconnect the evap system. There is a tube that is different, and I believe the evap canister is different. I can't remember because I did this like 5 or 6 years ago, but I remember there being something about the canister that had to change. I know there is a tube that goes out to where the gas filler neck is that is different because you had to change the gas tank. And because the gas tank's different and the evap system's different, you have to change that evap canister that's underneath the spare tire well. It's pretty easy to do. Just mark your hoses like I did. Push in on the hose and then push in on the black ring or the red ring if you're looking at the big hose or the small hose, and pull back and the hose will pop right out. It even shows you on that sticker how to do it. But here's the rear subframe for the Quattro system. You can see the gas tank for the front wheel drive system is located directly behind it, along with the front wheel drive rear suspension. You'll notice the all-wheel drive gas tank in just a second, but that's the major difference between the all-wheel drive rear subframe versus the front wheel drive rear subframe. Now this is the Quattro gas tank. When it's in the car, you'll see a huge difference. But you can see in this picture, I kept the emergency brake system because it was easier to deal with. Plus, it has a bracket that is the exhaust hangers that I wanted to use for the new exhaust. These are the original heat shields that were on the front-wheel drive system that had to be removed. And then I mounted the Quattro gas tank in there and then started installing all the heat shields after I did that. Slid the rear axle up in there, bolted into the original mounting positions on the chassis of the vehicle, or the body mount positions on the vehicle. Bolt threads were the same, bolt lengths were the same, everything lined up the way that it's supposed to. You can see the emergency brake cables hanging down. I've got them mounted up at the rear, but go ahead and mount the shocks in, and then add the heat shielding to the gas tank and the transmission or the drive shaft tunnel. And then I'm going to get into the brackets. So these pictures are a little dark at some point, but if you look in this current picture, that you can see the brackets to the left and the right. They're a little bit darker. They're not the white part. And then there's a heat shield that goes over top of them, and that's showing the heat shield covering them up. But I've also got pictures of those in the original car. These are the brackets when they were in the original car. Now, I had already cut this car up like I did my A6, and I didn't notice that these brackets were not in there until I started trying to bolt the drive shaft in, and I realized they were missing. So what I did is, if you look at the body mount point to the right of these brackets, if I measured from that body mount to the mounting hole in the center of that bracket, and that's how I made my position. And then I also measured, I actually went to the junkyard and I measured an X pattern from body mount to the other side of the drive shaft tunnel to the other bracket, and then from this bracket to the other body mount on the other side of the transmission tunnel. So I had an X pattern and I had a straight across measurement for each of them. And I also did a measurement from drive shaft mounting point to drive shaft mounting point when I went to the junkyard. So I wish I would have known this before I cut the car up, but that is something that is important. I don't have those measurements currently, but if people need them, I may go out and measure my car just so that you can have the measurements if you need them for anybody that's doing this swap. So that's all you have to do is just drill out. You can see I'll try and circle 2 of the spot drills, 3 of them that are holding them in. But if you just drill out those little spot welds, you don't have to destroy the bracket. You just drill the spot welds out and the bracket will pop right off, and then you can re-weld it into your vehicle. Now, there is an ECU, or not an ECU wire that has, I believe that, yeah, there may be an ECU wire, but I think this is for the instrument cluster. Like I said, it's been 5 or 6 years since I did this, maybe even longer than that. but you do have to repin add a wire to the instrument cluster. And then I was also adding heated front and rear seats to this car at the same time, so that's what some of this wiring is. So once you get all that done, then you should be able to mount all your heat shields in the transmission tunnel where you're going to mount the shifter, and you should be able to go ahead and get your shifter set up in place, unless you're leaving it on the transmission. Now, when I did this swap, I left the shifter box all as one piece and bolted that in. And I'll show, here's the difference between the two transmissions, the front wheel drive being on the left, all wheel drive being on the right. Main difference is just tail shaft length. The bell housings or bolt patterns are exactly the same. Sorry for how dark the picture is, but the bell housing bolt patterns were nearly identical. I think there were a couple bolt holes in a different location, but the blocks drilled for either transmission, because they're basically the same. The rear differential is a different part of it. So yeah, if you okay, I think that's all my pictures of it. Okay, so if you just swap out drop the rear axle, drop the original rear subframe, remove the gas tank and all the associated heat shields, the evap system, welding, remove all that stuff from the Quattro vehicle as well. Get your measurements for the drive shaft mounting brackets, remove those from the Quattro car, measure out where it belongs on the front wheel drive car, clean up that area, weld them in, seal them, prime them, paint them, and then mount everything into the vehicle, and you're good to go. Now, you can still weld the brackets in after the rear axle and everything's bolted in, because that's what I did. I got ahead of myself because, like I said, I didn't realize that I needed those brackets. So just that's the main reason I'm trying to make this video, is to help out anybody that would be interested in doing some stuff like this. That way they can have the information that's required before going into this and not knowing everything that's needed. So I might even include where the wiring for the second fuel sending unit belongs. But all it is it's a single purple wire that you got to run up to the instrument cluster. And I don't believe there's anything that you have to run to the ECU, but I'll check, and if there is, I'll add it to this video. Alright guys, hopefully you found this video useful and helpful. My main objective is just to help out the community, help other people that are trying to build vehicles for themselves. So I looked at my wiring a little bit further, because like I say, it's been 5 or 6 years since I did this swap, maybe even longer. Bad with how long ago shit happened. So, but it was a while ago. But it is very doable. It's not that hard. It is very time consuming. I want to say when I did the swap that it took me upwards of about 25 to 35 hours. And I was doing it by myself without a lift in that carport that you saw the pictures. It was cramped, not a whole lot of fun, but I got it done and everything worked the way that it was supposed to. So hopefully this gives you everything that you need to know. Feel free to ask questions if you have questions about it, because like I say, I've done this before, didn't have any issues with it at all. Now, I have not done it with an automatic car, but I would assume that it would work the same way, but you would have to have the TCM for the Quattro transmission. The reason that it doesn't affect anything on the manual transmission is because there's no TCM for any of the braking systems that's controlling that. It's all controlled by the wheel sensors, so the wheel sensors are the same, front-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive, as far as my understanding of it is. Now, going from the 5-speed to the 6-speed, you're supposed to have to recode it, but I never did and never had an issue out of it. But if you go from a 5-speed to a 6-speed, you have to change the rear differential in the rear axle itself, because the drive ratio is different in the 5-speed rear axle versus the 6-speed rear axle. So just know that going into it, that if you're going to go to a 6-speed swap, you need a 6-speed transmission that came with a 6-speed rear end. If you get a 5-speed swap, you need to get a 5-speed transmission that came with a 5-speed rear end. The 5-speed and the 6-speed rear ends do not interchange with each other. The gear ratios are wrong. You will be either spinning your tires, or you'll either be spinning your back tires or your front tires, and you will get horrible gas mileage. The car will bounce all over the place. It will not drive good at all. Ask me how I know. But anyway, if you found this video useful, like always, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let your friends see what I'm doing. I may see if I know anybody that has a front-wheel drive car that wants to switch it to a Quattro so that I can actually do a video series on it, but I myself don't have any intention of buying another front-wheel drive car and making it a Quattro. But if you're one of those people that has a front-wheel drive and you desire the ability to have the Quattro, this should be all the information that you need. I know there's probably some things that I left out, but if you get into the Quattro swap and you're trying to tackle it based off this video and you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll help you in any way that I can. So, hope y'all have a great day. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.